talking about such things as I was the last time we were taping again, about, and the time before, if you recall, I was talking about rich men, the idea of rich men again, and I was mentioning that people wired up for certain jobs in life, especially being rich, and all that entails. Not inheriting money, but getting rich. And I put it more or less like this, that such people, as a rule, do not have any extensive free time to take up other hobbies such as this. And that people are wired up to fulfill certain jobs. That brings up the idea again that I get little small notes, and I know it already, that when you start, and for some of you, even it's been around a while, I know what happens. I know how the brain works, but we'll blame it on other people, newer people, and people out there perhaps seeing this on tape just for a while from a distance. In the beginning, everyone has some difficulty, especially the way I've been presenting things, and still do, and plus the nature of the way things are, not just blamed on me, but the difficulty, to put it in very succinct words, of trying to figure out, trying to come to some conclusion as to whether man is really as mechanical as it would seem sometimes by what I say and by things that may click in you and you go, yeah, or is he not? You know, the question, is man just some kind of robot? You know, the rich man, is that all he can do? Is somebody that's a guitar player and just a fanatic about it, is that all they could do? Could they have done anything else? Could my father have been any different? Could anybody have been any different? Are people just robots? Because at times, you've got to admit, from the old world level of intelligence, at times there is no doubt that if it didn't strike you that way in life, sitting there listening to me talk and pointing out certain things, and not just the power of my persuasion, but I start pointing out how things are, and based upon your own past experience and the way you're wired up, if suddenly I stopped and said, all right, I want to know, this is the most important question, do you believe that man has any freedom at all? Your nervous system, your brain itself at that moment, if you answered, as they call it, truthfully, that is, in response to what your nervous system is typing out and clinking out, you'd say, no, absolutely not, it's just obvious as hell. And at other times, if I'd ask you and things are a little looser and you're under different conditions, you'd go, well, I know I said absolutely that man had just no freedom, that none of us do. We're just wired up in this piece of machinery. And even the idea of do we have freedom or not shows that we don't have any freedom because we're wired up to ask such questions. But no, we're not. No, we got some freedom, but we couldn't even ask the question, are we absolute robots or not? So even though I know I said last week that I thought he was, that can't be absolutely true. It seems to be a sticky question, to say the least. It's not, of course, an either-or situation. And it is not, it is that such even questions are unsuitable, they're unusable, as straightforward, as pertinent as they would seem. And I wanted to even tie in a few other things besides the rich man, just several things I'd hit on that brought it, I can circle around if you can take your own brain and help tie some of it together. As far as whether it's absolutely mechanical or not, I can again, if you would follow me talking and not through any verbal or otherwise trickery, just point out that we absolutely have no freedom. We have no more freedom, the way that our intellect calls it, than your liver cells have freedom to decide, well, will we work today? We want to, does any of us, maybe just one cell, says, I'm sick of being a liver cell, I want to be a kidney cell. It is not possible, literally, you know that. All right, I can point out that there is solid validity in the 3D verbal world to saying that man has no more freedom than that. I can, by the same token, even though I don't point it out necessarily on that basis, that I'm trying to prove that he does, I can talk in such a way, just through common experience, that you'd think, yeah, we got to have some freedom. Let's take it, the human nervous system, although it's not a perfect parallel, and I'll point out to you again. Let's take the nervous system and imagine that we have cut off the higher end for a few moments out of man, and that there is a usable parallel between man and some other three-dimensional creatures, let's say a dog. that as imperfect as it is, there is some validity to saying that in the lower end of the nervous system, the cellular, sensual structure of a dog and a man, if you consider that a man does not, his nervous system did not go any higher, did not go into the realm of the intellect, then let us say that there is some real parallel between the two. All right? The lower end of the nervous system, well, the whole end of the nervous system of the dog, the whole nervous system, and the lower end of the nervous system of man, that there is some comparison. All right? Trust me for a second. The motor levels. A dog constantly turns around before he lays down. Now a dog, of course I say constantly, sometimes they don't. All of you that's got a dog, chances are the dog a lot of the times turns around before he lays down. Let's don't even go into sometimes he doesn't, because that even makes it more interesting. But let's say that dogs always turn around before they lay down. But if you'll notice, a dog can turn around 3 times, 4 times, even 2 times, and then lay down. Now if you can see, I can assure you, if you can see, and he starts it, the dog is going to lay down. That is, life has wired up that dog at that point to cut into his life arbitrarily and artificially to make this hole in the fabric so that you can try and look into it. The dog is going to lay down, but down at the motor level, you could say, without any great fear of contradiction and without going astray yourself, that the number of times he turns around before he lays down to life at that moment seems to be fairly irrelevant. And yet the dog has no intellect. The dog is not thinking, well, I've turned around 3 times and I normally turn around 4 times. That's become my ritual, my habit. It'll be bad luck if I don't. It can't do that. Now, intellectually, at the ordinary level, I will admit to you that it is extremely difficult, any of you who've ever tried it at the old level. Now, I'm saying extremely difficult in my funny, Friday night, innocuous, acrid manner. It's impossible, but it seems very difficult for you to imagine what it would be like to be a human and not be able to think. Or to think how it is that a dog, your dog's laying there looking off, and every now and then cuts his eyes, and if you ever sit there and think, I wonder what he's thinking, of course you might as well be in a kennel, because the dog's not thinking. Or you watching your dog, as a rule, turns around 3 times. But then sometimes you notice he'll turn around 3 times and he'll hesitate and turn around again. And you think, well, what caused him to do that? What do you think about? Nothing. For you to try to think about you, why do you do things? Why do you make gestures? Why do you stand a certain way? If you start thinking about it, you would start coming up and say, well, my father used to make gestures. My grandfather was 1/4 Italian. Or if somebody said, why do you stand like this? Oh, well, when I was a child, I hurt my back. Or I was always shy as a child, and I think I got in the habit of sort of like this. And of course, I don't really feel like that anymore, but it's just habit. You'd say all that stuff, and it's just irrelevant. You must know that by now. The truth is, you don't know why you stand like you do, because the truth is, there's no reason that you stand like you do any more than there is for somebody to say, why in the world are you so ugly? You think, well, I didn't intend to be. Why are your ears so long at the bottom? You know, give me a break. It's the same thing as saying, why do you stand like you do? Why do you cock your head when you talk like that? Same thing. But the mind can't think about it that way. Now back to what I was saying, there is something here that I can't point out directly to the intellect. That's why I'm saying, pointing out to you already, that there's difficulty, to say the least, in the intellect, imagining what it would be for you to be a functioning human like you are, and to be able to do things and not think about them, that they just happen. It's, you know, as if they don't now. But what I want you to see, in a sense, in one real sense, a dog would be mimicking, or would be running a parallel course of being, let us say, pretty damn near absolutely mechanical. Dogs, worms, everything else. Got no intellect. They can't think about, why am I turning around? What kind of silliness is this? Or to think, I turned around 3 times this time. Is anybody watching? Should I turn around again? Should I show off? Or do they look around and say, well, nobody's home. I don't even have to turn around. I'll just flop. So down at the motor level, in the nervous system, without an intellect, without a cortical fold over dusty part of the brain that we have, without them having one, the dog turns around for no particular reason that you know of. But sometimes he turns around 3 times, sometimes 4 times, sometimes 2 times, and of course sometimes none times. But he's going to lay down. But it's as though within life's body there is this tolerance. And you've got to admit, you can't find any apparent, or I'll give you a second to think about it, even in occult, in the obscure reason that life has dogs turning around before they lay down. Can you think of anything just that comes to you? Now, some of you are halfway sober and sane. Does anything come to you that you would think has some direct pertinence on the life of man? Just the general life of everybody, the life of this planet, over a dog turning around before he lays down. Everybody think about it a second. The answer is no. If something strikes you, I don't want to hear about it. As far as you can tell, there is no reason. And yet they do, and yet there's variation in what they do. In other words, it's a mechanical compared to the apparent tolerance that the human brain has, that yes, we have some freedom of will, that we can make choices, which is one of the things that those people trying to decide, are we absolutely totally mechanical or not? Because on some big scale it seemed like it is, and yet here I stand, and now I think about it, what I'm about to say now, I can either leave my hands, my fingers locked, and keep talking, or right now I can undo them and not. And to myself I think, all right, there is some freedom, because right now I can just stand here while I'm apparently trying to think of the next sentence, and I can look down. Or once I think about it, or I can stop for a second and I can think, well, I'll look up instead of down. It's no great trick. Anybody, once you think about it, faster, as fast as the speed of light or electricity, you can think, all right, there is some freedom, because right now I'm going to pause and look off, and I'm going to look off to the left and scratch my chin, like I'm thinking. And then right quick I can think, nah, I got the freedom, I'll look off to the right and not scratch my chin. And so instead of pausing for a second, I decide to do, I can, although I was going to do that, I can decide, no, I don't have to do that, I can go. And so you would think at that moment that by God we got some freedom. Although the dog does not think. Remember, the dog is going to lay down. You've been around a dog, you can surely tell your dog's about to lay down. And sometimes you, physically, you can't even visually. That part of the electromagnetic spectrum, you cannot even look and see that he's made him move yet, and yet he walks down to you, or he stands up from one place and walks over, and just from being around it, you know that he's about to lay down closer to you, and you know at the times, if you notice, that he's going to turn around. So he's going to turn around, and yet it seems as though within that, however life is making him turn around, that within that, it's almost as though life, even though remember the dog doesn't even have a concept of freedom versus non-freedom, that it's almost as though life lets even dogs have a certain amount of what your brain calls freedom, that it can turn around 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and obviously it doesn't know why. And in a sense, you'd have to come to a semi-conclusion that maybe life doesn't even know why. Which is why I said it apparently is irrelevant to life, other than the fact the dog's going to lay down, that it seems to be fairly irrelevant to life whether he turns around 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Would you believe, I ask rhetorically, while pretending that I'm about to look off to the left and scratch my chin and won't look up to me, that this has some usable pertinence to yourself? Because there is nothing, no thing to be gained by pursuing that kind of ordinary thought, that kind of ordinary interest, as to there being an absolute question, much less an absolute answer to, am I just locked into this living machine, or do we have freedom? Now, even though you may not use those exact words, your O-level intelligence does pursue that. It's been pursuing that for as long as you've been alive. And you do not have to be a philosopher. You do not have to be that well educated, but you have been pursuing that in ways that you were not necessarily aware of. You are pursuing that whenever you defend yourself, whenever you excuse yourself. You are philosophically, that is, intellectually, even not using the words of art that I've used. You are engaged in that intellectual struggle as to whether we have any freedom or not. Every time. When you were 5 years old, I didn't do it. My sister pushed me. Well, you didn't tell me. You didn't tell me to do that. You are engaged in a philosophical wrestling match. The dialogue is running you red hot over the question, do we have any freedom or not? Every time you make an accusation, 5 years old, where's the ice cream? To your mother. She forgot. But you told me you was going to bring it. You told me when you left that you would bring me ice cream. Yeah, I know I did. You told me you would. All the way from that to right now, to talking back to the TV set, to talking back to the president, to the prime minister of some other country that says, we're going to do so-and-so. You go, good grief, you people said that before and you're still engaged in that war. Same thing. You are engaged in that question as to whether we are mechanical, locked in to just automatic behavior or not. And of course life has it wired up in such a way. I'm assuming that some of you are already caught on. When I say you're engaged with wrestling with this, you're in a continual engagement with this question, your engagement is always on that limited one life view, your one little peephole, as to the times that I don't seem to have any freedom is why I can excuse myself and defend myself. And there are times that there is some kind of freedom. That is when I accuse others. What? You told me you'd bring the ice cream. You had at least the amount of freedom you told me. Mommy, I asked you, can I have some ice cream? You went, okay. Well, when? Well, I'll be gone about an hour and a half or 2 hours, but you'll bring it when you come back. Yeah, I'll stop just before I come home so it'll be nice and cold and I'll bring it to you. Oh, great. Your mother had the ability to remember that. You remembered it for 2 solid hours. And you heard the car, she drove up, you ran, where's the ice cream? She doesn't have it. You are engaged in that question. You are engaged in the question when you said, well, you told me. What you're saying is you had the freedom to do that. And then when she said, why did you fall down in the ice cream and you get your clothes dirty? She asked you later. She pushed me. Or I tripped. Well, I told you not to run, didn't I? And what you're saying is I had no freedom. Something made me run. I couldn't help it. You know I'm clumsy. I just fell. Well, I told you not to fall. Like, which crying is like the ultimate frustration. The ultimate sign of ignorance is. I don't mean just with children. I mean you grown-ups. In the ordinary way that people cry. In a similar manner, let me point out, a real revolutionist cannot be looking for absolute, unchanging directions, information. It's not a question which people who believe they're interested in some sort of that kind of secret knowledge syndrome. They want the damn knowledge, if there is such a thing, mystical or otherwise, that there is some group of people or somebody somewhere that knows secrets. Reflections of it being religions, UFOs, missing societies, civilizations, all of that is still that same, that I want some information that's got no freedom. That is, I want some information, as the philosophers say in Mississippi, I want some information, what am information? That is, I want information that somebody says, all right, this is this and that's that. And that's the name of that song, period. That's what I want. I don't want some kind of information that says, well, on one hand it looks like so-and-so. Well, on the other hand, that's back to the question of, do we have any freedom at all, or are we locked in? Are we just doomed to our behavior? Ordinary people, especially think that there must be something else. And I don't mean just strange kooks, to give you a way out, see, I gave you a little tolerance, that believe that there is real, solid information somewhere to be gained. They are, unbeknownst, taking a firm stand on one side or the other. Is there freedom or is there not? The kind of information that this is about to continue to call it information, directions. Whatever it is that's happening at the intellectual level when it's happening. It is not absolute. It is not unchanging, and it is not called into the either-or question about, well, all right, now I've learned a lot from the stuff that I've heard you talk about, but now what you just said just then, is that absolutely a fact? I mean, is that it? Oh, it's not. Well, no, I didn't say that. There's no usable, real revolutionary information that is absolute in either direction. That this is absolutely true or this is absolutely false. This is absolutely tied up, stable and concrete, or this is absolutely relative. This is absolutely subjective. This is absolutely, if I may be so blunt, my opinion. Real information of this sort, real information right now I'm putting in quotation marks, I assume you know. Whatever this kind of activity is about. Not my information, not just what I said, but the energy that would seem to be at an intellectual stage, that would seem to be intellectual food, traveling on intellectual byways. It has to have a tolerance. Now, I have talked enough, surely even once, if some of you only heard it once, for me to use the term, which I have often known for a long time, of life being a kind of vitas machina. Not just a machine. We had Greek philosophers wandering around half drunk, which is fine with me, talking about life as a machine 2,500 years ago, so I didn't think up the term. Except it's not a machine, period. If you're going to use the term, you ought to throw in living machine, which at least confounds the intellect, because there's no such thing as a living machine, right? Wrong. But for me to point out, even at a quite material level, I have pointed out to you that a machine, just in the 3D world, cannot be perfectly fitted. No two gears. The internal workings of any machine cannot be made what would seem to be, theoretically, to the three-dimensional mind, perfect. If it was perfect, the machine would not move. There has to be tolerance. The gears, let's just take gears, that's the easy one. They cannot be made to fit, quote, perfectly. They have to be, quote, slightly imperfect. There has to be a tolerance or they would not move. If they were perfectly fitted, perfectly stamped out, perfectly fitted, it would not move. So there has to be tolerance. Real exploratory, revolutionary information has got to have tolerance. There has to be a kind of even known, at least on one end, ambiguity to it. If not, it won't move. You cannot transfer it at all. It's difficult and iffy as it is already, but it would not move at all in the 3D world. Assuming there was some kind of piece of the dreamed of secret information, the secret. And if somebody knew it, they couldn't tell you, because the secret, if there was such, a sentence somewhere, the secret. A large part of it wraps around into the saddle sphere. So to bring it back down here into this sentence is impossible. But let's get past that. Let's say that there's some possibility of it being less than impossible. If the person understood, well, it's impossible to actually bring it back, to pull it all in the three-dimensional world, but I'll give it a good shot. The good shot would be this. And anybody who understood it would not have to sit around and analyze it. I mean, it's that fast. Is, all right, the person might think, all right, here's the most direct way to put it. They might think that, but they would immediately discard it. Because it would have to have a kind of tolerance built in. You understand? I hate to put it to you directly. No, I don't. Fuck it. If there was, and I'm not saying there is, but if there was one sentence that was a direct, right way at this time and this place for somebody to say it, they wouldn't say it. Because it would be like locking up gears in the nervous system. They would have to take, if there was a best way, and slightly rough it up. To cause a kind of imperfection in the gears. To take the carpets, as the Muslim weavers used to say, that they all, the real orthodox, serious ones, would always, no matter how great they were, the Persian type carpets, right at the very end at least, they would purposefully make a flaw just to remind themselves that only God, only Allah is perfect and we're but humans. If a person said, and it was true, again I repeat, I'm not saying there is, but there was one succinct sentence, and this is the best way to put it, what I can see and understand, and these people will know, and the person saw that, they would not tell you that, they would fuck it up a bit. They'd rough it up, they'd willfully make a flaw in it, so that there'd be tolerance. Because if there was a real good direct way of putting it, it would just lock up. No matter how hard you tried, your brain would just hear it, and it would be like two gears that had been cast, machined, put together, both of them perfect, and you put them like that, and they won't move. Somebody's got to go in there and rough it up. Somebody got to take that sentence, if there was such, and take one or two of the words and move them around, change it slightly to where this is not exactly what I was going to say. And then it might have some value. Along those lines, that continuing little gambit I do at times about, even though this could not have a name, that one of the possible names, and then I come up with these, and sometimes you people get a chuckle out of it. Let me speak for the big thing, life. If life is going to speak, I would suggest that life might say sometime to those that were interested in such that, hey, and tonight would be a good night, if life would just say, you know, what you people are doing really has no name. And those that think it do, they're not doing it. Of course, I've told you all that. Life would just be, and you go, yeah, he already told us that. But life would say, all right, if this was going to be a name, life might say, here's a possibility of a name. Now here comes the name. It's not going to sound like a name, but here's the name that I would suggest to you that life might come up with tonight. And the name would be, you catch my drift? Those of you who did not laugh, right quick, try and run back everything I've talked about for the last 20 minutes up to that. Not those of you who are not laughing out there, especially those of you who are not laughing in 1991, seeing this tape. Notice, neither I nor life, even with the possibilities of names, never came up with one that says, all right, the name of this should be, this is it. Or, I'm here to tell you. Because if you think that those in jobs like me in relating this at times can be circuitous or oblique, obtuse, non-specific, then imagine this. Imagine, you know, what I'm getting. Well, that's not the point. But it's to think, well, listen, if there's some secret to this, which, you know, some of you went through this, you might as well admit it when you first ran across this, or me specifically, and you thought, boy, some of this sounds right, or I just feel like this is the real right thing, but quit beating around the bush. Come on, just out with it. Life doesn't just out with it. Hence my suggestion tonight, if life was ever going to say, this doesn't really have a name, but if it did, it might be, you catch my drift? Another area I wanted to mention, and it first struck me when I was about to say it, that I could have made a Chi root out of it. And it's the kind of things I haven't done any Chi roots, if you notice, for a while. Because one is, if I start doing them more, I want to up the stakes. Because too many of the chi roots only strike at a place because of the way you receive them, not because I couldn't attempt to do otherwise. We're still pushing the absolute limits of the three-dimensional world verbally. But it's to where it always sounds like it was a dichotomy set up, and then I, in some way, or chi root, stuck a hole in it, looked at it, pointed toward it in a very unexpected way when they worked right. But it was still like on a dichotomous situation, and at times, even not being specific verbally, is the laughter it elicited from some of you, the reactions. Some of you at times your eyes almost watered, and you didn't know why. It was on the basis that neither one of them was funny. The two possibilities, or the punchline, is not what I expected, but it's not what I didn't expect. And it's not that what it said was funny about the first part, the setup, because the setup was as funny as the punchline. It was all pretty what? Pretty ambiguous at times. That some of you really had to be tolerant to laugh. Because if I'd suddenly stopped and said, wait a minute, stop this reading. Why did you laugh at that? I mean, just give me some idea. Most jokes you can take apart and say, well, it was funny because of such and such, because the punchline represents how people treat each other. When the chi roots are right, and if I'd suddenly jumped and said, all right, why did you laugh? When they were really good, that is you and them, because it took both of you to dance with it, you couldn't really answer. Kind of vague. It was more like, you catch my drift? Yeah, except don't ask me what the drift is. Back to where I was, the main part of the road here. This would have made a chi root. So let me give it to you. In the three-dimensional world, you'd first say, here's another aside of what you're going to say, and then maybe say, all right, here's what I started to say. But we're big people. So I'm going to do the cheap version first, and then the chi root could have been this. In fact, I'll tell you how much faith I got in some of you. I bet I could give you the first line, and some of you could come up with the second line that I've got in mind. All right, it would be like this. It would sound like you own it. And chi root said, it's not what you discover, it's... And the line I had in mind, I bet some of you just fill in and to be just about it. It's not what you discover, it's the discovery itself. It's the process of discovery. In other words, or a little more distinct perhaps, it's not what one discovers, it's the joy of discovery. That would sound like a decent chi root. But let me see if I can give you some hint as what I was saying that I could try and push, because it takes you, it's not just me. You got to have the receptors for it to begin to push it. If I ever start doing more, which I'm doing them, I just don't preface them anymore with them chi root said. In other words, there was two. It's not what you discover, which would sound, that should fly in the city. People go to school, people go off on treks, spiritual and otherwise, people read, people meditate, take drugs on the first basis that I want to discover something, these secrets, I want to discover myself, I want to discover a closer relationship to the cosmos, whatever, I want to discover. So it starts out, the first part, it's not what you discover. So we've already gone past one of the reasonable, useful, necessary levels, legs, areas of ordinary existence. So we've already sort of not just bypassed it, but we're already tacitly saying that there's more than that, which for many people, that's it. So the first part is not what you discover. Okay. So now you're ready. The second part would be, the final part would be, it's just the joy of discovery. Now here we go. Are you ready? I'm going to turn it into 3. If there was an extreme synonym for subtle, I would now suggest it to you, but there's not. In the 3D world, subtle, subtle. Here is the Franco triplets version. the tripartite dancers. So it would go like this. It's not what you discover. It's not even the joy of the process of discovery. It's the near illicit exhilaration of discovering that you can discover. When this little living machine in the midst of the big living machine, you and I, and even on tape, when it's just right, that is what is happening. It's not just the discovery that I say, well, it takes two to tango. You think, God, how insightful, I got to write that down. That would be a discovery. Or for me to say any system in the three-dimensional world that begins to operate truly efficiently will then appear to be out of control. God, that sounds like a discovery. I'm glad I was here tonight. I'm glad that I had met you and heard that. I would never heard that, never thought of it. So you write it down. That's like the first part, that we already went past that. It's not what you discover. And I'm not making light of any of that. I wouldn't be staying here talking. But then the second level, you can say, well, you're right, it's not just that. Because I can't always remember them. Or sometimes I'll even write them down verbatim. You'll maybe repeat it, and I'll write it down, and the next day I even look at it, and it's not that big a deal anymore. Or last night when you said it, I went, woo, woo, and I wrote it down. And now I go back and look tomorrow. So now we're getting past. It's not what you discover. It's not even the joy of discovery. It's the joy of discovering that you can discover. Subtle indeed, but when the thing is flying correctly, that is what is taking place here and in you. How about it in this way? If you enjoy hearing me talk about all these things, just think of the fun it's going to be as you increase your ability for you to talk about these things. For you to see them. Because it is when it's right. No. It's no laws to me. And it's no fake this or that. It is enjoyable or you wouldn't be here. Because you're not tricked, you're not drugged, and there is no apparent payoff to this. So from one level you can say that either you are absolutely deranged, even in a more complex manner perhaps, or you enjoy hearing me talk about this. At the very least, we'll say. That you enjoy hearing me talk about this. But just think of the fun as you increase your ability. Because for me to talk about it, we'd have to say, well, apparently I can see these things or think about them and then talk about them. And boy, I enjoy hearing him talk about it. Yeah! But how about the joy of discovering, the joy of you being able to talk about yourself? Was that almost an encouragement or a promise? Hell no. Boy, are you tolerant, whoever you are, to ask such questions. A small continuation, or perhaps not a small one, from the last time we were taping. Me talking about a real explorer having, as he treks around the edge of chaos. Won't you be melodramatic, all right? Pushing the frontiers of the unknown possibilities that a real explorer has no backup plan, no fallback position. All right, you've had 48 hours, again. Did anybody think on this? If so, did you think of this, that there is the ultimate, as always, in the three-dimensional world, which is one thing neat about the 3D world, is always an ultimate. And even if there's not, all you got to do is talk loud, be fairly arrogant, pushy, and fairly reasonable or reasonable people, and you can make them believe at the time that yes, there is an ultimate in this area, and this is it. And they can say it. You go, yeah. Somebody can just say. How many people own an automobile? Well, all right. How many people enjoy it sometimes? Well, yeah. All right. I'm going to tell you, the ultimate driving experience is having a Ferrari. There's nothing. I'm telling you, I've had everything from Corvettes. I've had Mercedes, a Ferrari. And many people go, well, I remember that. The ultimate driving experience is a Ferrari. Well, you know, why not? I remember that. Write it down. In fact, the Ferrari, and I'll give you the model number. Back to what I was going to say, which I don't know how to differentiate that from what I just said. But what I was going to say, thank God I had the freedom to say something else rather than what I was going to say. Either that or something made me say that.
Okay.
The ultimate fallback position, the ultimate backup plan. I bet all of you thought about it and figured out what it is. The ultimate backup plan is, and I quote, I could have done it differently. I can change. There it is. At that moment, there is no more entanglement, personal entanglement in the question of, do I have any freedom? Has life really got me locked in? Is circumstances, is my environment, is my heredity, is just the pressures of life, is it just got me locked in? I just can't move, or can I move? There is built into everyone. Forget any psychological commentaries, forget any psychological stories in life, forget even your genes. God knows they forgot you. There is built in, running down through life, blossoming forth verbally in the human nervous system on this planet, the continuing, always available, open 24 hours a day, backup plan. Anytime it's necessary, anytime it's convenient, not to you, to life, anytime it's necessary, the backup plan, said overtly or otherwise, no more argument about does man have freedom or not. There's a backup plan. There's a backup plan that not even being able to figure that one out. The backup plan is this. I could have done it differently, because after the plan in the 3D world running along this line of irreversible time, there is no question as to the reality that I could have done it differently. How can it be proven that you couldn't? Your family, your friends, the local Shriners, the Junior B'nai they can all line up and everyone condemn you for what you did. And you go, yes. Even I wish I hadn't. And whether you say it or not, though, there's a backup position. There is a fallback plan. Because even under these conditions, that your whole community, your whole tribe, the weight of your immediate world is on you, that you shouldn't have done that. Do you die if you're an ordinary person? Do you collapse? Do you go insane? Do you suddenly explode like your own little quasar and become a black hole? No. You may cry, you may whimper, you may ask forgiveness, you may fall on your knees. You may say, well, I'm going to have to think about it. No matter what you do, what is going on in life itself is the ultimate backup plan. Is, well, I agree. But by agreeing, what you're saying is, I could have done it differently. And nobody can prove you couldn't. Not even you. It's not a lie. How can it be proven in the 3D world that you could not? We got to turn the tape over. See, there's some things in the 3D world you can't fool with. Yeah, there is. I'm going to show you. I can make the tape go longer. Well, turn it over anyway. We'll take the easy way out. Once, and maybe once and a half, in talking about this and that, I mentioned that although it was too late, but that it had some useful validity, or I wouldn't have brought it up. I said that if any of you, blossoming into real explorers and other strange mutants, if you had known what you were doing and where this was all going and what you had the possibility that other people had to turn around 3 times, and it turned out that maybe you can turn around 3.5 times, or maybe 2.5 is how you ended up here. But if you'd known what you're doing, getting to what I was going to say, I would have pointed out that all these ideas that people have about struggles with their parents and whether there's debts owed me and the debts I owe them, that the way that if you'd known what you're doing at a very early age, what you would have done, in a way that I got to tell you that the words are not exact, even though I point out to you that it may be a lie, that the words may be exact. But it would sound as though the words are not exact, but I put it to you that you would have, in a sense, frightened your parents. A nice, healthy. I don't mean that they thought that you were some kind of one of these little creatures in movies that are supposedly demon-possessed, or that their father was Lucifer. But it's just that at an early age, your parents would have had a kind of respect, like, what is this I've got here? But you would have sort of frightened them. And I point out that, of course, it's too late. And I, of course, point out that frightened wasn't the word. But reminding you of that is setting all of this paragraph up, I guess, as tied to the general or larger map I was making, that a real explorer, while out pushing at the frontiers of the unknown possibility and treading at the edge of chaos, now turned totally within your own nervous system, within your own dialogue. This kind of activity, you are electrically, chemically pushing at the frontiers of unspecific possibilities. You are running at the edge of chaos, not in a pejorative or a frightening sense, but chaos as far as the structure, the overall structure of your neural patterns right now. You're playing with chaos as far as they're concerned. Along with all of that, inside of your own dialogue, although it's too late with your parents, if you begin to find what you're doing, what you would do is kind of do this with your own dialogue. That is, you should kind of make you afraid of you. In the dialogue, it is not just fear, but that was what I wanted to point out specifically in one way, because there is another way. You set up in a new territory, in a new way, the relationship between this already established, non-evasive, inescapable dialogue that's running through people. It is the chemical, electrical basis of the nervous system in the three-dimensional level. But your relationship internally changes, and it's not just fear. That's what I was going to point out first. Your whole relationship is a dialogue becomes sort of non-personally friendly with you. Or you can turn around another way, that you create a kind of new, fairly passing by in the morning, using this, of course, elusively, totally, but a kind of hi, and it smiles. It doesn't say much more to you than you say to it. It's like somebody you pass in the office, or a neighbor that you've moved in. You're a new neighbor, you're in a new territory, but you moved in a new neighborhood. You don't seem to be potentially a mad dog killer, but you're not over there barring their grills. You're not over there asking what time it is, or they have any sugar. You don't look over their fence. If you happen to see them and they see you, you may smile and say hi. And when they pass you, perhaps many mornings you pass as you're going out your drive and out theirs. But it's such that since you act that way, to put it in three-dimensional terms, then they seem to have no great propensity to come over and intrude in you. It's as though when you look at them and nod and smile, they look at you and nod and smile. If they think that your eyes are about to meet in the morning and suddenly you look off somewhere else, it's as though that they'll do the same thing. That they seem to take their cue from you. You just seem to be the kind of person that they don't intrude upon. They don't know why. They just sort of treat you like you treat them. There is that kind of arrangement in relationship, I suggest to you, that is a new kind, and as you don't have to fake it, but I'm suggesting that something along those lines, given a certain degree of tolerance, and given a certain remembrance that I am, of course, not telling you exactly what I could tell you. I'm roughing it up, so that there is some ambiguity to it, some freedom for you to fool around with it, but a kind of relationship between yourselves in the dialogue. But besides, even though I put the other one first, most of you would consider that if this indeed begins to happen, you would consider this to be the biggest boon to yourself, is that you're no longer at your own throat, apparently. That the very things that everyone, including you, have always believed that, well, something in my past, something in my makeup even, has been such that I've always been self-condemning. I've always been full of guilt. I'm shy and all that. And once you begin to see it along, let us say, some of the maps I've laid out, you begin to see, well, it's the dialogue talking to me, wherever it came from, genetically, whether it was environmental, which of course it's not, but I'm just saying in the beginning you can take it any way you want to, but you realize that this thing talks to me whenever I'm experiencing that. And of course then you can in the beginning get tied up in the same way of, are we free or are we absolute robots? You can get into some discussion of what, all right, do I just think about this every time I feel shy? Or did I start thinking about it and it made me shy again? They're running along like that, which is what a dialogue is. They always occur together. Well, you can't prove that, okay, but every time you're shy, don't you think about being shy? Yeah, but you can't prove which came first. I'm saying, no, I can't. But to a real person, they would go, God, you're right. No, you don't want me to say any more about that. See, that's two. There's a third one. All right, if you don't want me to say anything. But beyond that kind of friendliness, a kind of hands-off friendliness, a kind of sort of how are you? Beyond that, there is a very specific way that other aspect of the dialogue in this new area, a kind of way that you should make you kind of afraid of you. All right. A few nights ago, I mentioned this. Is make the dialogue kind of feel that you just sort of tolerate it. Or what I was going to say that I brought up a few nights ago, make the dialogue feel as though you're tolerating it, but that at any time you could rape it. That it might as well go ahead and be seduced, because that is the ultimate seduction, is to give yourself over when you realize that what you're giving yourself over, or if it was a person, who you're giving yourself over to. Yeah, I'm being seduced. I can call it that right now, because it says, come here, sweetie. And if I don't want to, I will. I'll be seduced. Based upon, you say to yourself, the understanding, based upon the fact, it's kind of being nice and saying, here's a candy bar, cutie, come here. It's either that, or it's just going to take me anytime it wants to anyway, so, why not do it the more genteel way, the friendlier way. It's to get the dialogue, your dialogue, to the point that it understands. It definitely feels that things seem to go along. You wave at it every morning. If it waves, you may wave. Sometimes you may wave it up. I put it the other way, but it really gets to a point that you kind of, if it does it. But to give it the impression that you're just kind of tolerating like a neighbor. And it's not going to push it too far, but at times if apparently the neighbor wants to seduce you, the dialogue needs to have the feeling, well, it's either that, or he's just going to take me anytime he wants to anyway. Your own dialogue, I don't guess I have to ask if this is sounding strange or surprising enough to some of you, but your own dialogue, what seems to be your personal, which is a illusionary farce, but what seems to be your personal dialogue, what seems to be you personally, the noise in you, what you take as being you, you should make that thing really sort of afraid of you, to where it has a continuing perception, the feel, I'll go ahead and say it, that you are just tolerating it, and that anytime you want to, you can rape it, you can trash it, you can damn sure outthink it, which is the final word. I'm not going to bring you up another description of what you do, but I think I ran a fairly increasingly complex gamut from you can tolerate it, but you can rape it, you can trash it, and you sure as hell, without any question, can outthink it, or else you couldn't do the other three. Or else you couldn't make it think you can do all of the other three. It would not be in a position of being tolerated. Because up until now, in the three-dimensional world, I can aptly describe it, it's been reversed. You feel as though you have been tolerating something. You feel as though that something has been running you. All humans do. You know, hence the idea of guides and unconscious and blah, blah, blah. But you feel as though it's almost something tolerating me. You know, life itself. And when it gets through tolerating me, it says, well, pull that guy's plug. Make her real sick. Keep her sick about 2 months and then... Oh, yeah, let him get successful. Let him have a record that begins to sell a little bit and he gets all excited and then the company goes bankrupt. But I am getting more specific. It is what seems to be the individual line of energy, which you've got it. You know, ordinary people call it the spark of life and the soul and all that. But you're plugged into an individual line of energy, but everyone takes it individually. You're supposed to. You take it personally, and that your thoughts and your life is all very, very unusual, if not bordering upon unique. That your thoughts are your own, whether you like them or not, or whether unconsciously somebody impacted you in such a way that you now have those thoughts, but at least they're yours. The dialogue, it is a power line. It is running off the main circuits into the one into your house. It's making you think. It makes your nervous system alive. It keeps your whole being from the motor level on up. All of your cellular structures alive. But it's a dialogue. In the general field, once you begin to see it, and everybody is, that there is something greater than me. And you people, of course, should be the point that it's not a matter of a God outside the system. There is things, there are forces, there is something bigger than me. And it's merely tolerating me. Once I use that term, you ought to be able to accept that. You got to reverse it to where the dialogue, not life, you're not going to beat life. It's not a contest. Well, even if it is, I hate to tell you, you're not going to win anyway. But it's not a basis that it's a direct confrontation, that one of you is going to be right and one of you wrong. But the dialogue, forget about anything outside there, the dialogue in you is to make that thing sort of afraid of you. And the basis, once I ran through those several, I tried to kind of sneak up of saying that, to have a feeling that you kind of tolerate it. Of course, between you and I, if it's not listening, I've already pointed out, it's not a matter that you're going to just do away with it and finally say, dialogue, be gone. You know, shut up, I don't want to hear you again. You can do that with a ball-peen hammer, remember, and the screwdriver up through the nose. It's not a matter of saying, all right, dialogue, go away forever. But it's reversing, shifting, going into new areas to wherein what seems to be the relationship in the dialogue. You know, at times you can't tell who's you and who's not you. Or at times if you say you can, all you got to do is blow your nose, sniff, hear the doorbell ring, and then, if you can see it the right way, what was apparently not you in the dialogue is now you, and what was you a second ago now seems to be not you. That part of you that seemed to be talking in the dialogue and the part that seemed to be listening have now changed places just in the blink of an eye. But into a new territory, you take the whole dialogue. Forget it, it's split up into sometimes the talker and the listener. Well, all the times you can't tell which is which. But you take that whole operation of the dialogue itself. Just assume it's still going on, that there's still the dialogue going on that always went on to you. Let's say that. And now there's a new kind of you. There's a new part of the brain that can be awakened, that can come to life in the dialogue. Let's say the same junk, the same stuff, good and bad, right and wrong, stuff you approved of, didn't approve of. Let's just say it's still going on. Just like the current running through the house, just like a muddy creek that's always run through you, like some stream. But now let us say that there's a new little tributary, and you can get over there and stand, but the river's still going on, the same stream still going on. In that stream, what you need to do is that the big thing, the established one, the dialogue, is now kind of afraid of the other one. And it has sort of the feeling in toto now, the whole thing, that you just kind of tolerated. And that anytime you want to, you can kick its ass, you can strangle it, you can push it around, you can rape it, you can do everything, let's assume, except absolutely kill it. Of course, you can do that, you know. I hate to tell you, but you know, when it goes on vacation, you might as well punch out the clock because you're going with it. But So it's not a matter that you're going to do away with it, but it will understand finally that there is no contest because this new little thing can outthink me. That's it. All ideas of me saying you can rape it and that you tolerate it, I use it for certain pictorial reasons to get you to look around internally. But what it amounts to is now you can outthink it. That's it. And there's nothing they can do about it. I mean, they can go to school, they can do all kinds of stuff. They can do anything it wants to. And you can tolerate it. They can take up all kinds of dreamy activities. But the kind of internal position then is that it knows that you just kind of tolerate it. Which, as I said, if it's not listening, we might as well put it that way, because you've got to tolerate it in a sense. As long as you're alive. Now, I'm not going to describe it in any greater detail. I don't mean that there's no change at all. But in a sense, the river, the dialogue that's in you now does not just simply stop. It's not quite that simple. It's not quite that direct. But let's just assume it does not stop and it goes on like it is. Let's assume that's not it, but assume. But then once there is a new piece of the nervous system, a new piece literally in your brain, new territories, they're smarter than it is. They can outthink it. How the hell did it get there? It didn't get you there. It's still thinking the same thing, still carrying along the same debris, the same info, the same feelings, the same knowledge, the same everything. And it will. I hate to call it this smart, but I'll have to. It's almost this smart that it knows that something has happened. It knows that. Because it knows that now it's kind of tolerated. It can get real mad. It can go through the same stuff it always did. And it doesn't get the same kind of hearing. It doesn't produce the same kind of actions. And it's almost as though somebody that it never expected, some new kid, nouveau riche, intellectually has shown up, and now it takes its best shot and it starts hollering about this and that, nationalism, patriotism, economics, morality, and it's almost as though somebody, some new, just out of nowhere almost, as far as it's concerned, goes there. And it catches on real quick that you go there, but in a sense, anytime you want to it, it's like you can turn around and say, shut the hell up, and it will. That you can just momentarily at least trash it, which is what you're doing by you no longer participating in it. It knows I can be raped, I can be had, because it knows this. Without knowing why, without being able to define it in any way, that you can outthink it. Which three-dimensionally, I'll add, is incorrect. Because people don't really know when you can outthink them. Even your own dialogue. But it knows that something is wrong. It knows that something has shifted. It knows that in a sense it's being tolerated. I said tolerate instead of patronized. But of course you get good at it. Hell, use patronize. It doesn't matter what. It's the kind of things I've tried to tell you before. I've hit them in Kai roots or hidden them in Kai roots about there was a guy who every morning looked in the mirror and talked to himself, or a guy who did this. It's like your own dialogue. Anything your dialogue has to say, you know by now. I can say, trust me, and you know that you can trust me. Plus, even if you don't know that, you know it's fun for me to say that because you should know by now I'm going to say something real direct. Your own dialogue, trust me. Anything it has to say, I don't care what, anything that it has, that it ordinarily supports, believes in, I don't care, patriotism, the family unit, a sense of decent morality, anything that it ordinarily believes in is useless. And once you get to that point, it's not theoretical, and once you get to the point, you know why. That is, you know that you know more about it than it does, which is, believe me, trust me, is one of the greater charitable statements I've ever made. It's what you know about anything. Patriotism, pride, anything. Religious fervor. What you know about it, it's not even comparable. It's you patting someone on the head. But once you know how to do it, it's not just me saying tolerate, I was being decent. It's you can trash the mother. Because, believe me, it has nothing to say. And you'll know it then. You don't have to trust me once you know that. Whatever it says, shut up. Laugh at it. Laugh can come in handy sometimes when you begin to take a snooze and the damn thing's back talking, and you're about to the point that the seducer is about to become the seducee. That suddenly this thing almost has got its hands in your pants instead of vice versa. In other words, you're about to go back, and it's all getting carried away about, well, blah, 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 blah. And by God, you're just about back over there in the stream going, the pulse is going, and the whole nervous system is about, and you realize what's going on. And then you go, oh, yeah. And of course, that's the time you can do shit like, what you're doing is kind of pretending. I'm making all this up. You can kind of pretend like, haha, I wasn't going along with that, but I made you think I was. Just to remind it again of you dumb mother. I'm just patronizing, I'm just tolerating you. I wasn't going all the way along with that and get upset and jump up and kick in the TV or go out and march in the streets with the rest of the people. You know, I know I was kind of acting like it there for a few minutes, but the joke's on you. And you took it seriously. And it doesn't have anything to say. It got nowhere to go. But I do. Bye.